Today I will showcase you all 5 classes that will be available at the release of Diablo 4. I will talk a bit about popular skills and experiences from the betas, so you can decide based on the actual playstyle of the class if it fits you. And on top of this I will talk about the weaknesses and the strengths of each class, and also give you some little hints on how to counteract those weaknesses in your building process. So let's jump right in. So in general, the Necromancer is best described as a skinwalker from The Walking Dead that can rise his own zombie army. The Necromancer is using his own blood and the blood of the enemies to his advantage and dominates the battlefield with his army of summons, and everyone fears the blood golem he can control. He usually wears a two-handed scythe, looking like the Grim Reaper, or a one-handed weapon paired with a shield, making him look like a long-fallen knight. The Necromancer has a set of 4 basic skills that, unlike other classes, allow him to generate resources, and the resources of the Necromancer is called Essence, which then can be used to cast more powerful skills. Something special here is the access to blood orbs with the skill Hemorrhage that allows a unique pick-up playstyle. So basically, if you use this skill, you have a chance that a blood orb will spawn on the ground, and you have to adjust your own positioning to pick up those orbs to get the full benefit. So this makes it unique in the way the Necromancer moves on the map. The Necromancer's class speciality is the Book of the Dead, where he can choose what kind of summons he likes to rise from the dead. His options are 2 different kinds of skeletons. You have ranged skeletons and you have melee skeletons. The ranged skeletons are more like a mage, and the melee ones are more like a Reaper style. And he also has a golem that can be drenched in either blood or bones, depending on your preparation. But you can also choose to sacrifice your summons like a real Satanist and get passive buffs instead that can boost your gameplay by a lot. Next in the skill tree, we will find the 5 core skills. Just to mention 2 popular ones from the beta, there was the Bone Spear that allowed for massive single target DPS, annihilating elite packs in a glimpse of a second. Also we gain access here to the skill Blood Surge, which is a high AoE damage that even has the possibility to heal yourself. So it is a skill that deals damage, has AoE, and has a built-in sustain mechanic. So pretty powerful right there. Those are then followed by Macabre skills, and this is also a point where one of the biggest weaknesses of the Necromancer lays. He has no access to high mobility skills. The best option at the moment to get out of difficult situations is the skill Blood Mist, that allows you to become immune for 3 seconds and buys you time to actually reposition yourself on the map in a less dangerous situation. In the next section of the skill tree, we find the corruption skills, which are basically huge area of effect skills that allow you to either apply a good amount of CC and reduce the incoming damage you are taking, or they will allow you to find another way to sustain your life and even boost your essence generation. These are then followed by the summoning skills, where the name is a bit misleading and you actually gain access to CC skills that, for example, allow you to pull all enemies into the open mouth of a corpse, and that lets you follow up with one of your heavy AoE abilities. So this is a fairly nice playstyle. You can basically group the monsters on one spot and all of your AoE will always hit the monsters. It's really powerful. This only gets topped then by the ultimate skills, which are really powerful, but on the other end also have extremely long cooldowns. Here the most popular one is Bone Storm, a skill that surrounds you in a hurricane of bones that deals massive amounts of damage. But here's the real fun. It also surrounds your summoned golem into the same hurricane, allowing you to deal twice as much damage with the correct positioning. Then the tree ends in 4 different key passives that are good indicators for new players, as an example, to determine in which direction a working build can go. Well, let's take a look at 2 different ones. Ossified Essence, for example, is your choice to go if you like the bone theme as it boosts all of your bone skills no matter what skill it is. If it's bone related, you're getting a boost. On the other hand, Radmar's Vigor is your choice to go if you want to focus on blood spells with a mix of more survivability and increased damage. We've already talked about the blood orbs, the blood surge, so all of this is going to be boosted by Radmar's Vigor right there. Now let's sum up what we just heard and bring it into the strengths and weaknesses of the Necromancer. The Necromancer is probably the class with the most unique playstyles available if we think about the blood orb generation. Also, it's one of the classes with the highest access to heavy AoE damage spells that can cover your whole screen. On top of this, he has many skills that allow him to sustain really long fights without ever needing to use multiple potions. So you are not like tanky because you have like insane amount of health pool or whatever. You just get your tankiness based on being able to sustain. So if you build your character around not getting one shot, this is a really nice way to go and access the sustain right there. But we also need to mention that the Necromancer can often feel terrible to play if you don't get creative to always have enough corpses available for your summons. There are some ways to get around it with decompose and stuff like this, but you have to be creative because the Necromancer to many players feels terrible if there's not enough corpses available. And now that we already mentioned the summons, it's often the case that those are not good in the late game and get outscaled. So be aware that if you're playing the Necromancer in the late game, it can happen that you cannot play a summon build. While the Necromancer is a really easy to play class, to actually master it, you need to get really good at your resource management, the timing of your skills, and your positioning, because you don't have an oh shit button like a big mobility skill that can just bring you out of danger in a glance. But to sum it up, the weaknesses of the Necromancer are definitely handleable, and if played to perfection, you will enjoy the class of Diablo 4 that has access to the most pets. And now to my personal final recommendation. I personally think that Necromancers are for players that have not a lot of experience in ARPGs. It's the perfect starter class to get into the game. Like I've already said, you can play this class with almost no knowledge of the game. Your summons will help you so much in the early game, especially because they can tank for you. So your positioning doesn't matter too much, but in the late game, you still need to reach a skill cap. So it's not a class that's only for noobs. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's the most beginner-friendly class because you will not have to deal with as many monsters at the same time as with other classes. On top of this, it has a nice variety of AoE damage and single target DPS, and it will never make it feel like, if you're building correctly, that your build is only suitable for AoE farming or for boss fighting. You can always get a build going that is good for both. And of course, if you enjoy huge area of effect damage with nice animations that cover the whole screen, make the world feel like it's raining blood and bones, you should pick the Necromancer. And just here to mention, the corpse explosion is by far the most popular skill of the whole Diablo 4 franchise, and that's only available for the Necromancer. So in general, the Druid is best described as a nature-loving hippie on a bad LSD trip. Since he is so close to nature, he can talk to wild animals and convince them to fight for him. And if the trip kicks in too bad, he gains access to winds and storms, or just decides to let his enemies suffer from poisons. The Druid either wields powerful two-handed weapons or goes for a one-handed weapon paired with a scary offhand to boost his damage. Those weapons get put aside if he chooses to instantly transform into a werewolf or a werebear. Nice side info maybe here: if you create your character of the Druid, make sure to choose the correct hair color, as your werebear and werewolf will change its looks based on the hair of your human. But now back to the point. The Druid has a set of 5 basic skills that allow him to generate his resource, which is basically called Spirit, and is later needed to cast heavy damage spells. And he also got the opportunity to become really tanky early on by speccing, for example, into Storm Strike, where he can gain 25% damage reduction, which is a huge advantage as a melee fighter class. The Druid's class speciality are the spirit boons, which allow him to talk to 4 different dead animals: the deer, the eagle, the snake, and the wolf. The spirits of those ghost animals can be passively strengthen him and also give him nice opportunities to get him some really great lucky hit effects ready. And as I said before, since the Druid sees the dead, he for sure had a lot of acid before. Next in the skill tree, we will find the 5 spirit skills. Just to mention 2 popular ones from the beta, there was the Pulverize, which if turned into an Earth skill with a legendary, allowed massive damage while transforming into a werebear. But there was also an outstanding high DPS skill, the Tornado. The only downside here is you will not be able to choose the path in which the tornado will fly. But there's good news, there are legendaries that can help you out with this fact and make the tornado so it actually goes directly onto the enemies and will not fly into empty zones. Those are then followed by defensive skills. And this is also a point where one of the biggest strengths of the Druid is. He might not have access to high mobility skills, but with his barriers like Earthen Bulwark, Cyclone Armor, he is able to stack so much Fortify that you basically always walk around with the double amount of your health. In the next section of the skill tree, we find the companion skills, which is basically your way of summoning animals that will assist you in the fight. Often used are the wolves, which you are able to command to seek out the prey and jump on them. You can even transform them into werewolves, killing enemies on command. And there's also the ravens, which allow you to easily spread your vulnerable debuffs on the enemies, and cause they will attack right from the sky. These are then followed by the Wrath skills, where you then gain access to shape-shifting cooldown skills like the Rabbies. That is also a great source for you to spec into a poison-style build. And also quite popular is the Hurricane, which will surround you with wind. So you're basically the eye of the storm, AoE damaging anyone that comes anywhere close to you. And this only gets topped by the ultimate skills, which are really powerful, but on the other hand also have extremely long cooldowns. Here the most popular one is Grizzly Rage, that transforms you into a werebear. But the clue is basically that whenever you kill an enemy in the werebear form, the effects are increased for another second. And this allows for a great frenzy, great killing sprees. So as long as you go into this blood rush, you can keep those werebear forms up. Then the 3 ends and 6 different key passives that are good indicators for new players as an example to determine in which direction a working build can go. So let's take a look at a couple here. For example, Bestial Rampage, where you can gain bonus stats if you maintain a shapeshift for a longer duration. Here a little spoiler, because there are supposed to be items in the late game that was already confirmed by the developers that will allow you to permanently keep a form. So this might be really interesting for this key passives because you can permanently unlock those passives and not only have it available in the short durations while you're actually casting a skill. Then we also have the stuff like Lupine Ferocity, where we deal extra damage on every 6th hit. So right here, if we manage to get a build going that's based on really high attack speed, this build could go nuts right here. Now let's sum up what we just heard and bring it together into the strengths and weaknesses of the Druid. The Druid is probably the class with the highest ability to stack Fortify, which makes him reasonably tanky while still maintaining one of the highest burst damages of the game. This is due to his unique playstyle, which allows him to shapeshift into a werebear or a werewolf form. But this also means the lack of mobility we already mentioned is a huge issue because this class needs to always be positioned perfectly to survive and deal lots of damage. And this is really hard as a close combat class. Another weakness is definitely the itemization on a Druid. The strength of your build is not found so much in the skill tree as for other classes. You rely on finding specific legendaries to determine your builds. Because for the Druid, there's so many legendaries that change the skills that you actually have, maybe transform the element and all this kind of stuff. So itemization, the most important part on the Druid, more important than on any other class. But on the other hand, once you get them finally, you can then easily say, thanks God, I picked the Druid and I am now a mean badass right there. So overall, I would say the weaknesses of the Druid are definitely handleable. And if you play it to perfection, you will enjoy in class of Diablo 4 that shapeshifts like no other. And now to the final recommendation. I personally think that Druids are for players that look to play a melee character that's not a tank, and rather a high DPS machine, but also not an assassin. So an offensive fighter that can take a punch is not a full tank, but still doesn't lack any damage, and you will still feel like it's a great clear speed as soon as you get your items there. Keep that in mind. And to play the Druid, you should have great map awareness, to always position yourself correctly, and you should be able to think in advance like a chess player. So it's not only important to know where you have to stand at this time, you should also know where you have to stand in the next seconds. So always think in advance if you're playing the Druid. And of course, if you're liking the animalistic playstyles, you have definitely found your best match in the Druid. He is an animal himself and he can command them as well. So in general, the Rook is best described as an assassin that can wield two different sets of weapons. He can wear a bow to do range attacks, and he can wield daggers, for example, to execute melee skills. And what's unique about this is that the Rogue actually switches dynamically between those weapons based on your positioning and skill you are using. So you don't have to pick a preference, you will equip all and even get the legendary effects from all weapons. The Rook has a set of 5 basic skills that allow him to regenerate energy, which he then needs to perform various higher tier skills as well as combo points. So basically energy is the resource of the Rogue, and combo points are one of the 3 different Rogue class specializations. And combo points work based on different skills. They will make you gain combo points, and then when you use another skill, those skills will be enhanced with additional effects based on the combo points you have. And the second of the 3 specializations is Inner Sight, which allows you to get access to unlimited energy if you fill up your sight gauge by attacking marked enemies. And the third and last one is called Preparation, where we are currently lacking informations as it will only become available after level 30, and the non-NDA beta so far have only been up to level 25. As soon as this information is available, I will add it in the comments of this video. Next in the skill tree, we will find the core skills. Just to mention 2 popular ones out of the beta, it was Rapid Fire, which actually allowed for solo world boss kills, and Twisting Blade, which was a really nice farm option to AoE burst, clear large packs, and you could also get down your cooldown a lot if you manage to pull the Twisting Blades through a lot of enemies. Those are then followed by agility skills. And this is also a point where we can talk about the biggest strength of the Rook, his mobility. Especially the skill Dash makes it feel like you're flying over the map and are able to dodge everything, and the cooldown of those skills are actually pretty low. In the next section of the skill tree, we find the subterfuge skills, which are all cooldown based skills that provide utility effects. For example, you can throw the smoke grenade that then will give a daze effect on the enemy. These are then followed by one of the main damage sources where many build strategies center around, and that's the imbuements. Imbuements are basically a way to enhance your weapons with magic and either turning them into shadow, poison, or cold, and giving you insane side effects. This only gets topped by the ultimate skills, which are really powerful, but on the other hand also are extremely long cooldowns. Here we will find, for example, the Shadow Clone that basically summons a copy of you that then deals 60% of your damage. This is pretty similar to Naruto if he uses the Harem Jutsu to duplicate himself and doing some cheeky things. And the tree ends in 5 different key passives that are good indicators for new players, as an example to determine in which direction a working build can go, as they can be center actions to a build to work around it. Now let's sum up what we just heard and bring it into the strengths and weaknesses of the Rook. Rook is probably the highest damage dealing class. His core skills are extremely impactful and are key centers in your builds. You do have to keep in mind to think of creative ways to recover your energy so you can constantly use the strong but energy-thirsty skills. Rook is also the class with the highest mobility in the game, at which he has access to at pretty low cooldowns that can even be reduced more with items. Also, he got access to many CC abilities, and of course if the mobs are CC'd, even if you walk normally, you still feel fast, and you are able to create a nice gap between you and the monsters to do some kiting, for example. But the Rook also has weaknesses, and if you choose a Rook, it's your responsibility to counteract those weaknesses and create builds that turn the weaknesses into at least even crowns. The first you can just fix by playing properly, and this is the fact that Rook needs to have really good positioning during its fight to actually deal max damage. This results in Rook having the highest skill cap to play. Then of course, dealing so much damage comes with the downside of being squishy, and the Rook can't take many hits before he dies, so dodging abilities and positioning is a key factor of this class. And here we are coming to the last part, the skill rotations of the Rook are really dependent on one another, so if you fail your rotations and for example you don't manage to apply vulnerable, you don't manage to apply a poison, you will end up dealing low damage because all the effects are basically stacking off each other. So the weaknesses of the Rook in general are definitely handleable. And if played to perfection, you will enjoy the highest DPS class. And now let's finish it off with my final recommendation. I personally think that Rooks are for players that like to play ranged kiting classes as well as melee assassins. I would only recommend it to somewhat experienced players as it is the class with the highest skill cap. The build variety seems really widespread, and currently he is the only class that plays with traps, which often is a popular playstyle in other ARPGs. The class significantly rose in popularity lately, as the well-known streamer Wudio soloed the world boss Ashara with it, so if you feel like soloing a world boss sounds like something you want to do, pick Rogue. So in general, the Sorcerer is best described as a mage that freshly escaped Azkaban and turned to the dark side. He can either wear a huge staff for a big beating, or he can choose a small wand and an offhand, that sometimes even looks like a decapitated head. But no matter what weapon he equips, he has access to the elemental powers and can destroy his enemies with fire, ice, and even lightning. The Sorcerer has a set of 4 basic skills that, unlike other classes, don't allow him to regenerate resources on hit by default. The resources of the Sorcerer is called mana, and it regenerates automatically. But you can boost the process by speccing your Frostbolt into Glinting Frostbolt, for example, or by speccing your Firebolt into a Flickering Firebolt. The Sorcerer's class specialty are the enchantment slots, which become available at level 15 and at level 30. Those 2 slots allow you to set any of your available skills as a passive. So this means every skill of the Sorcerer has an active effect and a passive one. And here you can see the skill Flame Shield as an example. The active part, if we press it, makes us immune to any sort of damage and CC. But the passive part, if selected in the enchantment slot, will give us a revive after we die. This is also unique about the Sorcerer. He is currently the only class with access to a cheat death, which makes it really popular around hardcore players. Next in the skill tree we will find the 6 core skills. Just to mention 2 popular from the beta, there was the Ice Shards, which was your way to go if you wanted to play an ice-centered build. Those stood out with the ability to ricochet between enemies and also giving him some AoE ability this way. Another popular one was the core skill Chain Lightning, which sent out massive electric AoE damage that was also transformable into high single target DPS if you were alone with a target. Those are then followed by defensive skills. And this is also a point where one of the big strengths of the Sorcerer lays. Barriers such as Ice Armor and Flame Shield give you an insane amount of tankiness, while Teleport makes you one of the most mobile classes of the game and allows you to either blast through maps or dodge dangerous situations at ease. In the next section of the skill tree we find the Conjuration skills, which are basically summons that you can control. the most popular one being the Hydra, that can even get enhanced to have up to 5 heads and either applies heavy burn damage or can crit like a beast. These are then followed by the mastery skills, some of the main damage sources of the Sorcerer. To mention two, we have the Blizzard, which surrounds you in a dangerous field of ice, not only damaging the enemies, but also applying heavy CC effects around you. And we also have the Firewall, a hard to place burning area, but if you master it, your burn damage output will be insane and you truly feel like you mastered the fire element. This only gets topped by the ultimate skills, which are really powerful, but on the other hand also have extremely long cooldowns. Here the most popular one is the Deep Freeze, which allows the Sorcerer to become immune for 4 seconds while dealing massive amounts of damage and CCing surrounding enemies. So you're basically caught in an ice prison, you can't move, but you have those other great effects. Then the tree ends in 6 different key passives that are good indicators for new players as an example to determine in which direction a working build can go. We have 2 different key passives for each element. Let's showcase one of each. For fire, we have the Ezo's Ferocity, which gives us large damage boost if we manage to kill an enemy with a crit. For lightning, we have the Vir's Mastery, which gives us an insane amount of damage reduction, and this will enable sorcerers in the late game to go melee. For ice, for example, we have the Avalanche, that boosts all of your frost skills and gives you free skill casts, so really powerful and extremely good for your mana management. Now let's sum up what we just heard and bring it into the strengths and weaknesses of the Sorcerer. Sorcerer is probably the class with the most build varieties out there, just to the simple fact that the sheer amount of enchantment slots allow you so much diversity in the build creation process. It's just incredible how many different options you have on this class compared to other classes. With the skill Teleport, Sorcerer is one of the most mobile classes, allowing for really nice shenanigans. Also, the Sorcerer is the class with the most available CC out of any classes. But be careful, some monsters are CC immune, and if you center a build only for CC and you encounter those monsters, you sometimes just die because your build cannot handle it. So this is especially important in hardcore. And then we have a double-edged sword. While the Sorcerer is incredibly tanky with his barriers, he lacks a lot of armor. And it's highly important to remember this in your class building process. So, for example, just a little hint, if you're having jewelry, you can place crude skulls on there to get more armor. That may be like a little side information. Also, the resource of the mage, the mana, is not easy to handle, as you need to be really creative to generate lots of it, because it's a passive rather than an active regeneration. So good resource management is the key to the class. And one last weakness of the Sorcerer is definitely the team play, as he has almost nothing that buffs his mates or can provide huge team play value. Unless you commit yourself to being a CC bot for your team, that's your only viable team value that you can give. So to sum it up, the weaknesses of the Sorcerers are definitely handleable, and if played to perfection, you will enjoy the most versatile class of Diablo 4. And now to the final recommendation. I personally think that Sorcerers are for players that like to play ranged classes and enjoy kiting and dodging. If you're a newcomer to hardcore, this class is probably your go-to way, because it currently has the only cheat death available and will forgive you at least one mistake. And maybe some interaction that could also be important. If you're going into the proc of the Flame Shield, you have 2 seconds to activate your Scroll of Escape. And this gives you a really high chance of survivability in hardcore at the moment. In general, the skill cap is not as high as for the Rogue, but still in the tops, because the reaction time matters a lot playing this class, especially with Flame Shield timing to dodge skills and stuff like this. And of course, if you enjoy huge area of effect damage with nice animations that freeze the whole screen, make the world feel like it's burning or sending everyone on the electrical chair, then you should pick Sorcerer. So in general, the Barbarian is best described as a combination of Conan from the old movies and Chuck Norris. He will slay your ass in no time if you don't be careful. The Barbarian is a special kind of dude, carrying more weapons than he can actually count to, so his strength is definitely damage and not math. The Barbarian has a set of 4 basic skills that allow him to generate resources, and the resource of the Barbarian is called Fury. So basically, the more mad he gets, the more damage he deals. A popular basic skill is Lantern Strike, which especially in the early game will allow you to move fairly quickly through the map and get those important gap closes as a melee fighter. The Barbarian's class speciality is the Arsenal, which already unlocks at level 5 and allows the Barbarian to gain experience based on which weapon he uses to kill enemies. The weapons of his choice are quite wide, so he can use one-handed axes, one-handed maces, one-handed swords, but also use two-handed axes, pole arms, two-handed swords, and finally the last one, two-handed maces. So it's important to note that it's similar to the Rook, that the Barbarian has skills that can only be executed with a special weapon type, but then he switches between those weapons automatically. So you don't have to worry about it. You will also equip all of those weapons in your inventory, and you will get the effects, the legendary effects of all of them. And then on top, in the arsenal, all weapon types, they can be leveled up all the way up to level 10. So while you're leveling it up, you will already get a bonus. If you reach the max level, you will also get an additional effect for this weapon. And those bonuses are all passives. And you can even expand this a bit further, because at level 15 you can unlock the technique slot. And this will allow you to choose a certain weapon type to boost your stats on this even further. Next in the skill tree, we will find the 6 core skills. Just to mention 2 popular ones from the beta, there was the Whirlwind, which allowed the Bard to spin to win, and also proved that he is not one of those guys puking on the roller coaster. Next up, we had the Upheaval, which allowed for massive bursts, even going so far to one-shot elites, and I think it's currently even the highest single burst skill that was available so far. Those are then followed by defensive skills, and this is also a point where one of the big strengths of the Barbarian comes to light. You will gain access to the first shouts here, and those are buffs that are not just limited to yourself, they benefit the whole team. So you buff, you cry, and all of your team gets the power. One example is the Rallying Cry, that not only increases your movement speed a lot, it also helps you massively with generating your fury. In the next section of the skill tree, we find the Brawling skills, which basically unlocks your movement options, like for example Charge, that can work as a gap closer, allowing you to storm onto enemies and CCing them. And then we have Leap, that's like your oh shit button. If you ever overestimate your tankiness while you're fighting the hordes, just press it and jump to safety and reposition yourself easily. These are then followed by the Weapon Mastery skills, which allow for a nice different playstyle. Let's make an example based on the Death Blow that allows you to reset the full cooldown if you manage to kill an enemy with the skill. So if you like dunking, this is definitely the skill for you. And this only gets topped by the ultimate skills, which are really powerful, but on the other hand also have extremely long cooldowns. Here you can, for example, call for help if you're tired from all the bard things. The skill Call for the Ancients will summon 3 powerful long fallen bards from the past that also have unique skills to them, and they can aid you during the battle. Then the tree ends in 4 different key passives that are good indicators for new players, as an example, to determine in which direction a working build can go. Outstanding is the Unbridled Rage, which increases the damage of core skills by an astonishing 135%, but on the other side also increasing the casting costs, so we have to choose wisely with this one. But this, of course, we've already talked about that Upheaval was one of the strongest skills, and imagine that you can get this multiplier on top of it as well, so holy shit, you can build up probably some stacking to get one-shots going. Another interesting one is the Unconstrained, which doubles the duration of berserking, maybe allowing for perma-berserking builds to benefit from the 25% damage multiplier and the 15% movement speed. Now let's sum up what we just heard and bring it together into the strengths and weaknesses of the Barbarian. The Barbarian is probably the class that's the best suitable for team play, as its shouts give massive boosts to the whole party. As he doesn't have really high range jump skills, he makes up for it with the insane amount of movement speed he can gather. The exception to this is the leap. The leap, though, does not have a lot of range. It allows you to reposition, you can get a stun with it going, stuff like this, but it's not like as far, for example, as the teleport on a mage. And this fact, alongside with his tankiness, makes him a real good mix of high AoE damage, but also having access to high single target DPS, like we have talked about with the appeal, and he, for some reason, is still a tank. So yeah, you basically got everything you have wished for in one class combined, except range. But of course, the buff also has a couple weaknesses, even if he doesn't like to admit it. It's by far the most heavily resource-dependent class with the worst resource generators. And on top of this, he has really long cooldowns. So you need to manage your cooldowns and you need to manage resources really well. Another thing to consider is he has literally no range spells at all. So you're always full melee, you need to have great positioning. There's a couple gap closers like lunging strike, charge, but in the late game, those skills seem currently better in the early game than in the late game. So be a bit creative when you do go into the build creation. And now that we've already talked about the early game, the Barbarian has by far the weakest early game out of all classes. But on the other hand, probably the highest end game scaling. So if you're looking for an end game beast, this is definitely why you should pick Barbarian. So overall, I would say the weaknesses of the Barbarian are definitely handleable, and if played to perfection, you will enjoy the most versatile class of Diablo 4 and a true weapon lover. And now to my final recommendations. I personally think that Barbarians are for players that like to play melee classes, or they played Garen as a one-trick in League of Legends and they are just into spin to win. If you're a team player and don't mind going tanky support, Barbarian is also a great choice for you. And of course, we also have to mention that if you like weapons and spend most of your days on the shooting range, there is no way you will not play Barbarian that has access to so many different weapons and of course can use the legendary effects of all of them. If you have any more questions about any of the 5 classes, let me know in the comments. I will always answer everything in less than 24 hours. If you want to discuss your choice or builds, I highly recommend joining my Discord server to meet like-minded people. And the last thing before this video ends, on the 4th of June, when I am coming home from my vacation, I will start live streaming daily on Twitch with a unique concept. We will play hardcore only, and if I die, this will trigger a community event for all of you, and the loyal viewers can earn nice rewards out of the cashshop. So you can win skins, battle passes, mounts, like all this kind of stuff. So don't forget to subscribe and follow to not miss out. Cheers!